The Meyers Manx sprang from the soul of a free-spirited Californian who loved the beach and always wanted to have fun. Bruce Meyers launched an automotive revolution with his Manx in the 1960s. It was an inexpensive, go-anywhere car that immediately clicked with a generation of like-minded people. Join us as we learn how Bruce Meyers turned his idea into a legend. In the mountains of Southern California, near Big Bear Lake, the Meyers Manx Dune Buggy Club gathered in the fall of 2004 to celebrate their favorite vehicle. While the club accepts fiberglass buggies of any make, the true badge of honor is the Meyers Manx. For nearly half a century, the Meyers Manx has epitomized the Dune Buggy experience. Its shapely fiberglass body is an icon of the off-road adventure. These go-anywhere, do-anything vehicles appeal to people with a can-do attitude. To them, shearing off a wheel is an opportunity to use some creative driving techniques. Any adversity adds to the day's fun. This group of die-hard Manx lovers was up to the mechanical challenge. They were sure they could drive on three wheels. They were going to drive it as it was. When they got to the pavement, they were going to put it on a truck and trailer, then see if it could be fixed, and go for another ride. Unlike most four-wheel drive vehicles that conquer the world through power, the Meyers Manx was created to sort of surf the trails. We found that the Meyers Manx really is an attitude or state of mind, as well as a vehicle.
Well, I wish you good luck. I'll pray for you. So pray for me. I will.
Bruce Meyers dreamed up and produced these iconic dune buggies. His creation helped give birth to the sport of off-road racing and the Baja 1000. Meyers vehicles embodied the spirit of California in the 1960s. They were simple, inexpensive, colorful, and fun to drive. The Manx's ride to the top is a remarkable story. It springs from Bruce Meyers' love for adventure that was nurtured on the beaches of Southern California, flourished on the back roads and dirt trails of Baja, California, and would lead him to hero status among off-road adventurers around the world. We wanted to understand what influenced Bruce Meyers to create the Meyers Manx, one of the most revolutionary vehicles ever invented. We started by showing up at his weekly get-togethers at San Onofre Beach, just north of San Diego. Meyers and his friends, some he's known since the 1930s, still surf, play guitar, and sing. It's like a scene out of a surf movie from the 1960s. We found out that Bruce has been surrounded by the ocean and music nearly all his life. His mother, Peggy O'Neill, was a well-known singer. She was so popular that people wrote songs for her, hoping that if she sang them, it would sell sheet music.
You walked into the Five and Dime store, you went up to the piano player up on a raised area, and you looked at all the sheet music, and if you liked something, you'd hand it to the piano player, and they'd play it back to you. If you liked it, you'd take it home, and then you had to play it yourself.
Songs like Peggy O'Neill, Peg o' My Heart, and Has Anybody Seen My Gal, that included the classic description 5'2", eyes of blue, were written about her. People rushed out to buy the sheet music. Some lingered around the stage doors, hoping to catch a glimpse of Peggy. One fan, Jack Myers, agreed with the lyrics. Peggy O'Neill is a girl who would steal any heart, anywhere, anytime. He pursued the young singer until she agreed to marry him. They ended up in Detroit, where he went to work for Henry Ford. Meyers convinced the inventor of the Model T to set up dealer networks.
He kept telling Henry Ford, he says, you can't keep selling these things off of a freight car, out of a book, which is the way you bought a Model T. You took a catalog and ordered it, and it came to you that way. And so he says, you got to have some dealers. So Henry said, go ahead, Jack, take off and take a car and go across country. Finally, he landed here in the West, where he had finally landed. The first Ford dealership was in San Francisco.
They eventually moved to Los Angeles and started a family. This soon included son Bruce, who was born in Los Angeles on March 12, 1926. The family kept growing and needed more space. Later that year, the ever larger Meyers family moved to Manhattan Beach, California. The family spent a lot of time by the water. Tragically, however, the very ocean he loved took the life of his brother, who was swept out to sea and lost.
My brother was lost in the surf. Brother George was lost at the age of 10 years old. And so by the fact that George was lost that way, we were not allowed to go into the water.
Bruce missed his brother, but he couldn't stay away from the water.
Of course, all I did was spend my childhood coming home with my blonde hair dripping down the end of my nose and my trunks all wet with sand in the crotch, and always being spanked and put to bed and told to stay in the house for a week from the time I can remember. But I still became a lifeguard and wound up jumping off the pier and becoming a surfer and all that. My life was a beach boy, sandlot kind of a thing. I had an old 39 Ford station wagon that was surfboards were always sticking out the back. And it was the picture of the goof off on the beach. You know, that's where I come from. I'm the original, I suppose.
One of his other passions was cars. Like a lot of teenagers in Southern California, Meyers was drawn to hot rodding. After a few trips to the junkyard, you could scrounge enough parts to build a car that looked cool on the streets and could be raced. The dry lake beds of the high deserts were only a couple of hours away from the beach. Meyers joined in the fun and took his car up there to see what it could do. All of Bruce's seemingly unrelated pursuits laid the groundwork for the creation of his revolutionary vehicle. Unfortunately, the days of fun on the beach and racing at the dry lakes were about to be put on hold. America was at war, and most young men, like Bruce, longed to join the fight. He had to wait until he turned 18 in 1944.
Wound up on a carrier, which happened to be the flagship of the whole fleet. The Bunker Hill was the ship. So the Japanese wanted to nail us. We got finally nailed by 2 kamikazes. I was back in the smoke at the stern of the ship where the fire was slowly eating its way towards us. So the captain said, jump over, so we did.
His years of swimming at the beach saved his life, and he saved several others. When he finally climbed aboard the rescue ship, he was pretty low-key about his heroism.
Found my own division commander. Meyers, are you all right? What's your story? I said, no big deal. And that's about all I told him. Well, I'd done the same thing as a lifeguard. And it was just another day's work in the water, kind of.
After spending the war in the Navy, Bruce Meyers plunged back into the fun of life in Southern California, but he was soon heading back out to sea. Bruce joined 16 other adventurers on a trip to the Cook Islands aboard a 108-foot schooner. The group wanted to set up a business trading copra and pearls. They set off on this romantic adventure in September of 1954. Even though their business ventures didn't pan out, Bruce fell in love with the islands. He discovered that much of what had attracted Paul Gauguin to Tahiti in the 19th century was still there. Bruce mastered the use of local outriggers and slipped into the rhythm of a vanishing island life.
By the time I came home from Hawaii, I'd been gone about 2 years. I was just totally immersed in the whole lore of the South Seas, just totally screwed up forever.
Returning to California, he revived his enthusiasm for sailing and started building and sailing catamarans. It was clear he was a talented designer and builder. His work was soon recognized by Jack Jensen, a major sailboat manufacturer.
Jack Jensen became the largest fiberglass sailboat builder of those times, called Jensen Marine and the Cal sailboat line. And so Jack said, I need somebody that can do tooling. And he was looking at my catamaran and says, why don't you work for me? So I did.
Bruce ended up building the tooling for a successful series of fast, all-fiberglass boats for Jensen called the Cals. At the same time, he began work on his own dream boat, the Hinano. Bruce hoped to recreate his trip to Tahiti with a friend. It took him a couple of years to build, but finally, it was ready for launch in 1961. However, the boatyard, and therefore the boat, was blocks away from the water. In true Tom Sawyer fashion, the ever-inventive Meyers decided he'd have a party and con the revelers into helping him maneuver the boat down to the beach. It was a massive undertaking, but after a few beers, the crowd cheerfully pitched in. A couple of cars had to be picked up and moved, but they made it to the launch area without doing too much damage. Once there, they encountered a sign forbidding launches without permission. They uprooted the sign, and the Hinano slipped into the water. It was a fast and sleek catamaran that made many trips to Catalina. But the friend who'd agreed to come along on the Tahitian adventure kept backing out, and Meyers sold the Hinano. About this time, he and his friends were discovering a couple of new ways to have fun at the beach: sand sailing and dune buggies. The buggies were fun, but were heavy and crude, and would sometimes get stuck in the sand. Bruce began work on an idea that would take the beach buggies to a new level: the Manx. He sketched out a sleek little roadster body that he knew he could make using the same fiberglass techniques he'd learned building boats.
I could only see it in fiberglass, and I could only see it looking a certain way, and I hated the looks of all the others. I just despised what they were doing because they didn't have that sensibility, I guess. Can't blame them, just that I didn't like them. I liked their functions, but I didn't like their looks.
He decided to use a VW engine with a shortened chassis. He worked tirelessly on his new buggy. As the body took shape, he gave it the name Manx due to its short rear end, which resembled the animal's bob tail. It was finally done and ready to roll on a perfect summer day in July of 1964. Bruce took it for a spin and turned heads. It was the lightweight, fast and responsive vehicle he'd hoped to build. He had his prototype, but he had to figure out how to sell his easy-to-build kit car. He offered it in 2 different kits. Bruce thought most people would want the bare-bones A kit that he sold for $350. He designed this option for the home craftsman like himself. Someone with a small budget could transform the 3 basic components, body, hood and dash, into a Manx by fabricating the additional hardware items they'd need to finish the car. For $530, you could buy Kit B and get all of the components and hardware necessary to turn an old VW into a new Manx. When it was introduced in 1964, the Meyers Manx became an instant classic that was recognized as the quintessential dune buggy.
You just see a Coke bottle, you know it's a Coke bottle, nothing else. A Volkswagen profile is a Volkswagen Beetle. People here locally in a little hardware store, a girl says, "What's Meyers Manx?" And I pull out a business card and it has a picture of a Manx on it. She says, "Oh, a dune buggy." So the shape says dune buggy, I guess.
One of his goals for the new buggy was to make it easier to explore Baja, California. Driving in Baja was an adventure. There was only about 120 miles of paved road between Tijuana in the north and La Paz, 1,000 miles to the south. Guidebooks suggested allowing 10 days to make the journey in a fully loaded four-wheel drive truck. A motorcycle had made it in 39 hours in 1962, but no one else had attempted such a wild ride. Bruce and buddy Ted Mangles drew up a plan to conquer Baja. They determined how much gasoline they'd need, filled their buggy with gas cans, and set out with a couple of other buggies tagging along just for fun. Racing over rocks and dirt, through sand washes and down dirty, dusty roads was brutal. They sheared off their brake line and nearly lost the transmission, but they made the 1,000-mile run from La Paz to Tijuana. The Manx clocked in at 34 hours and 45 minutes. They'd beaten the motorcycle's record by over 5 hours. News of the buggy's triumph hit the wire services and made headlines around the world.
And so this simple thing went out that said, "Buggy beats bikes in Baja." Well, some guy in Japan doesn't know what the hell Baja is, what a buggy is, but the phone started ringing nevertheless.
The Manx was on its way, and so was the sport of off-road racing. By November of 1967, the first official Baja 1000 race was set to begin. It was run by a new organization, the National Off-Road Racing Association, NORA, whose founder was inspired by Meyers' recent record run. The race attracted a total of 68 vehicles. Meyers fielded a team of 5 Manxes. 3 were factory-sponsored, and 2 were brought down by friends. They joined an assortment of Ford Broncos, Jeeps, and motorcycles, as well as the crowd favorite, a beat-up '56 Chevy that the owners hoped to sell after the race to finance their trip home. Pistons were lost. Radiators were punctured. Wheels were bent. Some crashed. One slammed into a cow. As the racers encountered rugged rocks and sand washes, it became clear that this was potentially dangerous. When the checkered flag finally dropped, it was a red Meyers Manx piloted by Vic Wilson and Ted Mangles that came roaring into La Paz to set a new record, 27 hours and 38 minutes. The Manx had won the first Baja 1000, and the team celebrated as mariachis played. The fame of the Manx spread along with the news about the Baja 1000. There was no question, they had to come back. They reaped a publicity bonanza on the heels of the success in the Baja 1000. Coverage in car magazines like Hot Rod, Popular Mechanics, and Road and Track, as well as in the mainstream media, helped put the dune buggy in the public eye. People started to drive them everywhere. Meyers set up a dealer network to keep up with demand for the Manx. He also developed a souped-up version of the Manx just for off-road racing. He called it the Toad because it had to be trailered or towed on normal roads. Beefier tires, bigger wheels, and a bigger engine promised to make the Toad a strong competitor. He had high hopes for it when he raced it in the 1968 Baja 1000. He confidently sparred with Parnelli Jones, and they both vied for the lead. But about 100 miles into the race, things went wrong.
Came into a dust cloud at a little arroyo, and I just flew into it, figuring it's going to be wherever I land, the road will be there, and it wasn't. I slapped the bank on the other side, the road dodged over here, and I just whammed into this thing at 55 or 60. So the Toad folded all up around my feet.
The Toad was totaled, and Meyers was seriously hurt.
I was lying, looking backwards with my back on the ground, with my leg bent, broken twice, back under the pedals, all smashed.
He was pried out, and after 22 hours in the back of a 1946 Ford van, made it to a hospital in San Diego. His two broken legs had taken a beating, and it was a long recovery. Unfortunately, his business was also taking a beating. Cheap imitation Manxes were flooding the market. He tried to stem the flow.
They were all over the place. They were all over England and everywhere, you know. So we just gave it up and backed out of it and went away broke with our tail between our legs.
The dream of the Manx died in 1971. Bruce was bitter and retreated, while the sport of off-road racing he'd helped to start boomed. He tried car restoration and then spent years building a beach house getaway in Baja. He stayed out of the limelight until 1994, when he and his wife Winnie went to the French Super VW Nationals as a guest of Jackie Morel, the publisher of France's Super VWs. Meyers was honored for creating the Manx. Morel encouraged Bruce to build a new Manx, start a club, and write a book. He wasn't a writer, but Winnie and Bruce did start a club, and he started to think about designing a new Manx, called the Manxter.
The Manxter was born out of that trip and the many times we've been there since. That's really why I changed, was because of Jackie Morel. He gave me hope.
It took a few years of trial and error to get it right, but Bruce is excited about his new buggy. He wants to make sure it delivers more smiles per mile than any other car. Bruce was so excited about the new car, he couldn't resist taking a Manxter down to Baja in 2003. The Baja 1000 had changed quite a bit since Bruce, his pal Ted Mangles, and others started to race there almost 40 years ago. The Baja 1000 has become the biggest event in Baja. It attracts TV and movie stars, Indianapolis 500 drivers, NASCAR heroes, and major corporate sponsors, as well as thousands of fans. Bruce is recognized for having inspired the race.
It's a very great honor for me to meet a nice guy like you. Thank you for giving us, you know, the whole country of Mexico something to live for, you know. It's a national holiday.
Bruce and the Manx were back and ready to motor into the new millennium. After all these years, the sense of fun and adventure that had always been his driving force was still alive and well.
To me, if you don't get the freedom, you haven't attained much. If the money doesn't allow you to be able to go and do what you want to do, who are you? It's really like I gained what we're all here for. And all it is right there.
Bruce Meyers launched an automotive revolution with his Manx in the 1960s. His funny little car stole hearts and became a legend. This unique machine set records and put smiles on everyone's face.